In 1921, British journalist Bywater wrote a novel called The Great Pacific War. In the book, he describes a Japanese fleet attacking the Americans at Pearl Harbor and capturing Guam and the Philippines. This work attracted great attention in Japan, where it even became required reading at the Naval Academy. As early as 1932, the United States conducted a military exercise in the Pacific, in which a hypothetical Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was simulated. During the exercise, over 200 ships launched a surprise attack on the harbor, devastating the unsuspecting U.S. military and causing an instant paralysis. This British novel and the American exercises may have influenced Japanese strategic thinking, as 9 years later, in 1941, Japan used much of the intelligence gathered from these exercises to design its attack plan on Pearl Harbor. At that time, the world was undergoing intense changes. In 1940, Hitler had invaded and occupied Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Britain, the strongest maritime power, was on the brink of collapse. Japan, observing the situation, perceived a unique opportunity to capture England and France's colonies in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, where the natural resources Japan desperately needed to fuel its war machinery were abundant. Japan had few natural resources of its own, and its military industry depended on oil and steel imported from the United States. The Nanyang region, rich in strategic resources like Indonesian oil and Malayan rubber, was highly attractive. However, conquering this region was a risk. Such an audacious offensive against Anglo-American colonies in Asia would almost certainly attract the American fleet. Faced with this scenario, Japanese Navy Commander Yamamoto, who had studied in the United States and understood its industrial power, designed a bold plan to launch a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto believed that if Japan could decisively destroy the U.S. fleet in the Pacific, it would buy time to consolidate control over Southeast Asia and secure the resources it needed. Japan's expansion would be solid enough to withstand any potential American recovery. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese fleet launched a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Most U.S. defenses were relaxed, and most planes were parked on the runway for easier surveillance. At 7:55 a.m., the first wave of Japanese planes reached Pearl Harbor, leaving massive devastation in their wake. 8 battleships were damaged or sunk, although 3 aircraft carriers, which were out of port that day, were spared from the attack. The surprise was so great that the Japanese managed to destroy over 180 planes and knock out much of the U.S. fleet, resulting in more than 4,500 casualties on the American side, while Japan only lost 29 planes and 64 men. By 2 p.m., the Japanese ambassador had officially delivered Japan's declaration of war to the United States. With the success at Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military launched a large-scale offensive across Southeast Asia. Japanese forces advanced quickly and captured the Philippines, Guam, and Wake Island, as well as Singapore, after crossing the Johor Strait and cutting off the city's water supply. Singapore, considered an impregnable British naval fortress, fell in February 1942, and 130,000 British troops surrendered in the worst defeat in British military history. However, despite the success of Pearl Harbor and the initial conquests in Southeast Asia, Japan did not deliver the devastating blow it had intended. The shipyards, fuel depots, and repair facilities at Pearl Harbor were not destroyed. This allowed the United States to quickly repair and restore its fleet. Moreover, the attack awakened a sleeping industrial giant, as the United States abandoned its isolationist policy and immediately focused its entire industrial and military power on the war effort. Within a few years, American military production surged exponentially. By 1942, the Navy and Marines had greatly improved their tactics and training to confront the Japanese enemy in a series of crucial battles across the Pacific. The first of these major battles, at Midway Island, marked a turning point where the previously dominant Japanese Navy was defeated. With a booming economy and a rapidly growing war industry, the United States was able to confront and reverse Japanese advances. U.S. forces launched decisive offensives, reclaiming island after island in the Pacific, while Japan, weakened and unable to sustain a prolonged war, began losing ground. Pearl Harbor became the turning point that shifted the course of the war in the Pacific, and sealed Japan's fate in World War II.